Look, I'm gonna tell you something that went down in San Francisco that nobody talks about. Something that shook the whole game. Picture this. A fancy restaurant in Nob Hill, dim lights, expensive wine flowing like water, and two people sitting across from each other who should have never been in the same room. On one side you got Marco Santini, the most feared man in Northern California, running everything from the docks to downtown, a guy who could end your whole life with just a snap. On the other side there's Victoria Chin, 24 years old, sharp as a knife, daughter of Governor Richard Chin, the man who's been trying to take Marco down for 5 years straight. Now here's where it gets wild. Nobody forced them to be there. They both walked in on their own. No guns pointed, no threats made. Just two people who were supposed to be enemies sitting down for dinner like they had all the time in the world. But what you don't know yet, what nobody saw coming, is that this wasn't just some random dinner. This was the beginning of something that would flip everything upside down. The streets, the politics, the families, everything. And by the time that night was over, neither of them would walk out the same person. Not even close. Hey, real quick before we dive deeper into this crazy story. If you want to know how this forbidden dinner between a mafia boss and a governor's daughter actually ends, and trust me, you're not ready for what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now and smash the like. Because stories like this, where power, danger, and secrets collide, don't come around every day. You miss this channel, you miss the wildest true stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. So do yourself a favor, subscribe, like, and let's keep going because what I'm about to tell you next is gonna blow your mind. Alright, so let me take you back to where this whole thing really started, because that dinner didn't just happen out of nowhere. 3 weeks before Marco and Victoria sat down at that table, something went down that changed everything. Marco Santini wasn't just some low-level hustler, nah, this guy built an empire from nothing. Grew up in the Mission District, dirt poor, watching his old man work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. By the time Marco was 17, he was already running numbers for the Italians on the wharf. Smart kid, kept his mouth shut, made the right moves, and 10 years later he wasn't working for anybody anymore. He was the one calling the shots. Controlled the ports, the supply chains, had cops, judges, even some politicians in his pocket. But there was one man he could never touch, Governor Richard Chin. That dude was clean, like squeaky clean, no dirt, no scandals, nothing. He made it his mission to take down organized crime in California, and Marco was #1 on his list. Press conferences, federal investigations, raids, the whole 9 yards. It was personal for both of them. Now Victoria, she wasn't supposed to be part of any of this. She grew up in Pacific Heights, went to Stanford, studied international law, had this whole bright future mapped out. But here's the thing about being the governor's daughter, you live in a fishbowl. Cameras everywhere, security detail following you around, every move you make analyzed by the media. She hated it. Felt like a prisoner in her own life. So she started sneaking out, hitting up spots in the city where nobody knew who she was, little dive bars in the Tenderloin, underground clubs in Soma, places where she could just be herself. And that's where it happened. One night at this low-key speakeasy off Market Street, Victoria's sitting at the bar, minding her business, when this guy walks in. Tall, sharp suit, confident but not cocky, and he sits down right next to her. They start talking just casual stuff at first, music, the city, life. No names, no backgrounds, just two strangers vibing. They talked for hours that night, and for the first time in forever, Victoria felt free. She didn't know who he was. He didn't know who she was. Or at least that's what they both thought. They kept meeting up after that, same spot, every Thursday night for 2 weeks straight. It became their thing. And somewhere along the way it stopped being just conversation. There was something there, something real, something neither of them expected. But secrets don't stay buried forever, especially not in a city like San Francisco. On the 3rd week, Victoria's security team tracked her phone, followed her to the bar, and when they saw who she was sitting with, all hell broke loose. Her father found out within hours. Governor Chin went ballistic, had her pulled out of there, locked down the whole situation. But here's where it gets complicated, because Marco found out too. His guys did their homework, ran her face through every database, and when they came back with the results, Marco couldn't believe it. The girl he'd been falling for, the one person who made him feel like something other than a monster, was the daughter of the man trying to destroy him. Most people would have walked away right there, cut their losses, moved on. But Marco wasn't most people, and neither was Victoria. See, by that point they both knew something had shifted. This wasn't just some fling or a coincidence anymore. It was bigger than that. So Marco did something insane, something nobody in his world would ever do. He reached out. Not through violence, not through threats, but through a message delivered clean and simple to Victoria's private number. It said, "I know who you are now. You know who I am. We can walk away and pretend this never happened, or we can sit down face to face and figure out what this really is. Your call. Thursday night. Same place we met. I'll be there. Victoria read that message 100 times. She knew what it meant. Meeting him again wasn't just risky, it was career suicide for her father, a betrayal of everything her family stood for. But she also knew that if she didn't go, she'd spend the rest of her life wondering what if. So she made a choice, the kind of choice that changes everything. She told her security team she was staying in that night, locked her bedroom door, climbed out the window like some teenager in a movie, and made her way across the city. When she walked into that speakeasy, Marco was already there, sitting in the same spot, waiting. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything was on the table. No more pretending, no more hiding. Just two people standing on opposite sides of a war that wasn't theirs to begin with. They didn't say much at first, just sat there, feeling the weight of what they were doing. Then Marco broke the silence. He said, "This is crazy, you know that, right?" And Victoria, without missing a beat, looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, but I'm here anyway." That night, they didn't solve anything. They didn't magically fix the impossible situation they were in. But they did make one decision: they weren't gonna let other people decide their story. They were gonna take control, even if it meant risking everything. And that's how the dinner happened. Marco suggested it, said if they were really gonna do this, they needed to do it right, out in the open, no hiding. He booked a private room at the most exclusive restaurant in Nob Hill, sent her the address and told her to come alone. No security, no backup, just her. It was a test for both of them. Could they really step into each other's worlds and survive? Could they sit across from each other knowing that their families, their lives, their futures were all on the line? That's what led to that moment I told you about at the beginning, Marco Santini and Victoria Chin, sitting across from each other in that dimly lit room, about to have a conversation that would change both of their lives forever. But what they didn't know, what neither of them saw coming, was that someone else knew about that dinner. Someone who had everything to lose if they stayed together. And that someone was about to make a move that would turn this whole story into a nightmare. So here's what went down at that dinner, and this is where things start getting real. Marco and Victoria are sitting there, menus in front of them, but neither one is really looking at the food. The tension in that room is thick, you could cut it with a knife. Marco's the first to speak. He leans back, keeps his voice low and says, "Your father thinks I'm the devil. Every speech he gives, every law he tries to pass, it's all aimed at taking me down. You know that, right?" Victoria doesn't flinch. She's cool, collected, just like her old man trained her to be. She says, "And your people think my father's a self-righteous hypocrite who doesn't understand how the real world works. So where does that leave us?" That's when Marco does something unexpected. He smiles, not his usual cold, calculating smile, but something genuine, something vulnerable. He says, "Honestly? I don't know. But I'm tired of pretending like this doesn't matter. Like you don't matter." And right there, Victoria's whole guard comes down. See, she'd spent her entire life around politicians, people who said whatever they needed to say to get what they wanted. But Marco, despite everything he was, despite the blood on his hands and the empire built on broken rules, he was being real with her. No games, no manipulation, just honesty. She reaches across the table, not all the way, just enough to show she's not backing down, and she says, "My father's not wrong about you, Marco. You've hurt people, destroyed families, used this city like your personal playground. But he's also not right about everything. I've seen what his war on crime has done, the families torn apart, the communities destroyed in the crossfire. Everybody loses in this game." Marco nods slowly, takes a sip of his wine, and that's when he drops the first real bomb of the night. He says, "What if there was a way to change it? Not just us, but all of it. The violence, the corruption, the endless cycle of revenge and power. What if we could actually make a difference?" Victoria looks at him like he's lost his mind. She's thinking this is a mafia boss talking about change, about making things better. But then he keeps going. He tells her about something she didn't know, something nobody outside his inner circle knew. For the past 6 months, Marco had been secretly working on legitimizing his operations, moving money into legal businesses, cutting ties with the worst elements of his organization. He was trying to get out, trying to build something real. But here's the catch: he couldn't do it alone. The families wouldn't let him just walk away. There were too many people who depended on the old system, too much money flowing through dirty channels. If he tried to go clean without protection, without some kind of political backing, they'd kill him before he could even start. That's where Victoria came in, or at least that's what Marco was hoping. He wasn't asking her to betray her father, not directly. But he was asking her to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, There was a better way forward than the endless war between her father's office and his organization. He wanted her help navigating the political landscape, understanding which fights were worth fighting and which ones just caused more pain. Victoria sat there processing all of this, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to think that someone like Marco Santini could actually change. But the other part, the part that grew up watching her father fight these battles, knew how dangerous this was. She says, "You're asking me to trust you. To believe that the man who's been terrorizing this city for over a decade suddenly wants to be a good guy. Do you realize how insane that sounds?" Marco leans forward and for the first time all night, his mask completely drops. He's not the feared crime boss anymore, he's just a guy sitting across from a woman he cares about, trying to explain something that matters. He says, "I'm not asking you to think I'm a good guy, Victoria. I've done terrible things, things I can't take back. But I'm asking you to believe that people can want something different for their future. I'm 42 years old. I've spent half my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when someone's gonna put a bullet in my head. I'm tired. And then I met you and for the first time, I saw what a different kind of life could look like." The emotion in his voice catches Victoria off guard. She's seen powerful men crumble before but never like this, never with this kind of raw honesty. And that's when she makes a decision, one that would change everything. She says, "Okay, I'll help you. But not because I trust you completely and not because I think this is gonna be easy. I'll help you because I want to believe that change is possible, even for someone like you. But Marco, if you're playing me, if this is some kind of game to get to my father, I will destroy you myself. And I have the resources to do it." Marco extends his hand across the table and Victoria takes it. That handshake sealed something between them, a partnership, an alliance, maybe even something more. But what neither of them realized in that moment was that they were being watched. Outside that restaurant, parked in a black SUV half a block away, was Detective James Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the SFPD and Governor Chen's most trusted investigator. He'd been tailing Victoria for days, under direct orders from the governor himself. Richard Chen knew his daughter had been sneaking out, knew she'd been meeting someone, but he didn't know who until Morrison got the photos. When Morrison saw Marco Santini walk into that restaurant, when he saw Victoria show up 15 minutes later, alone, no security, he knew this was bigger than anyone had imagined. He immediately called the governor, told him everything. And Governor Chen, sitting in his office at the state capitol, felt his entire world start to collapse. His daughter, his pride and joy, the one person he thought he could count on to understand why he fought so hard against men like Santini, was sitting down to dinner with the enemy. But here's what makes this even more complicated. Governor Chen didn't just see this as a betrayal. He saw it as an opportunity. If his daughter had gotten close to Marco Santini, close enough to have private dinners with him, then maybe, just maybe, she could be used to finally bring him down. Not through legal means, not through investigations and warrants, but through something far more personal. The governor started making calls that night, quiet calls to people who operated in the shadows, people who could make problems disappear. He didn't want to hurt his daughter, but he needed to send a message to Marco, a message that would make it clear that coming anywhere near Victoria Chen again would be the last mistake he ever made. And that's when the real danger started, because while Marco and Victoria were inside that restaurant talking about change and redemption and building something new, forces were already moving against them, forces that wouldn't stop until one of them was destroyed. Hey, hold up for a second. What do you think about all this so far? A mafia boss trying to change his life, a governor's daughter caught between loyalty and something real, and a father who's willing to cross lines to protect his legacy. This is getting intense, right? Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you were Victoria? Would you trust Marco or walk away? Have you ever been stuck between two impossible choices like this? Maybe you know someone who's been in a situation where love and loyalty collided. Share your story in the comments, I want to hear what you think. Your comments help me bring more stories like this to you, so don't hold back. And listen, you gotta stick around till the end of this video because what happens next, when these forces finally collide, it's gonna leave you speechless. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this plays out. Alright, so here's where everything starts falling apart, and I mean completely falling apart. That dinner ended around midnight. Marco walked Victoria to her car. They stood there for a minute just looking at each other, knowing that whatever they just agreed to was gonna cost them both everything. Victoria drove home thinking about how she was gonna approach this whole situation, how she could possibly help Marco transition out of his world without destroying her father's career or her own future. But when she pulled up to her family's estate in Pacific Heights, every light in the house was on. Her father was waiting in the front room, and the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. He knew. Governor Chin didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't lose his composure. That's not how he operated. Instead, he sat her down and very calmly told her that he had pictures, timestamps, surveillance footage of her meeting with Marco Santini. He told her that Detective Morrison had been following her for weeks, that he knew about the speakeasy, about every conversation, about everything. Victoria felt her heart drop into her stomach. She tried to explain, tried to tell him that it wasn't what it looked like, that Marco was trying to change, that maybe there was a way to end the violence without more bloodshed. But her father cut her off. He said something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. He said, "Victoria, I've spent 20 years fighting men like Marco Santini. I've seen what they do to people, how they poison everything they touch. And now my own daughter is sitting here defending him. Do you understand what that means? It means he's gotten to you. It means he's using you and you're too blind to see it." Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to make him understand, but deep down, a part of her wondered if he was right. Was Marco really trying to change, or was this all just an elaborate con to get close to the governor's family? She didn't know anymore. Everything felt upside down. Her father then delivered the real blow. He told her that if she ever contacted Marco again, if she ever went near him or anyone in his organization, he would have no choice but to cut her off completely. No family, no trust fund, no political connections, nothing. She'd be on her own. But more than that, he told her that he'd already set things in motion to take Marco down once and for all, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Meanwhile, across the city, Marco was dealing with his own nightmare. He got back to his penthouse in Soma, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: hope. For the first time, he could actually see a way out, a way to build something legitimate, something that didn't involve constantly watching his back. But when he walked through the door, 3 of his top guys were waiting for him. His consigliere Anthony Russo, his enforcer Tommy the Bull Marconi, and his money man David Chin, no relation to the governor. And they did not look happy. Anthony was the first to speak. He's been with Marco since the beginning, loyal to a fault, but even he had limits. He said, "Boss, we need to talk about what you've been doing. The meetings with the lawyers, the money transfers, the plans to shut down half our operations. Word's getting around and people are nervous. They think you're going soft, that you're planning to flip on everybody to save your own skin." Marco tried to calm them down, tried to explain that he wasn't betraying anyone, that he was trying to build something better for all of them. But Tommy wasn't having it. Tommy was old school, believed in the code, believed that you live by the sword and die by the sword. He stood up, got right in Marco's face and said, "You think you can just walk away from this life? You think the families are gonna let you go clean and take all that knowledge, all those connections with you? You're living in a fantasy, Marco. And now we're hearing you're involved with the governor's daughter? Are you out of your mind?" That's when Marco realized how deep this went. His own people were turning on him, seeing his attempt to change as weakness, as betrayal. And the worst part was he couldn't even blame them. In their world, going legitimate was the same as snitching. It meant you were cooperating with the system, and cooperation meant death. Marco had to make a choice right there, and it was the hardest choice of his life. He could either back down, abandon his plans, forget about Victoria, and go back to being the ruthless crime boss everyone expected him to be. Or he could push forward, knowing that it would cost him everything: his organization, his safety, maybe even his life. He chose to push forward. He looked Tommy dead in the eye and said, "I'm done living like this. I'm done hurting people, done destroying families, done being the monster everyone thinks I am. If you can't support that, then walk away. But I'm not changing my mind." The room went silent. For a moment, it looked like Tommy was gonna pull his gun right there and end it. But Anthony stepped between them, put his hand on Tommy's shoulder and said, "Let's think about this. Marco's right about one thing: this life doesn't end well for anybody. Maybe he's got a point." Tommy backed off, but the damage was done. Marco knew that from that moment on, he couldn't trust anyone in his organization. The cracks were showing, and it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn, and this is the part that nobody saw coming. 2 days after that dinner, Victoria got a phone call at 3 in the morning. It was from an unknown number, and when she answered, a distorted voice on the other end said, "If you want Marco Santini to live through the week, you need to meet me tomorrow night. Come alone and don't tell anyone. Not your father, not Marco, nobody. If you do, he's dead." The line went dead before she could respond. Victoria sat there in her bed, shaking, trying to process what she just heard. Someone was threatening Marco's life, and they were using her to do it. She knew this had to be connected to her father, to the moves he said he was making. But who was behind the call? Was it one of the governor's shadow operatives? Was it someone from Marco's own organization trying to set her up? She had no idea. But she knew one thing for certain: if she didn't show up to that meeting, Marco would die. And if she did show up, she might be walking into a trap that would destroy them both. The next 24 hours were torture. Victoria went through her day like a zombie, pretending everything was normal while her mind raced through every possible scenario. She thought about telling Marco, warning him, but the voice on the phone was clear: tell anyone and he dies. She thought about going to her father, asking him to call off whatever he'd set in motion, but she knew he wouldn't listen. He'd made his position clear. So when night fell, Victoria made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She got in her car, drove to the address the mysterious caller had given her, a warehouse down by the Embarcadero, empty, isolated, the kind of place where bodies got dumped and nobody asked questions. She parked outside, her hands trembling on the steering wheel, knowing that once she walked through those doors, there was no going back. She stepped out of the car, walked up to the warehouse entrance and pushed the door open. Inside, the space was dark except for a single light hanging in the center. And standing underneath that light was someone Victoria never expected to see, someone whose presence changed absolutely everything about this story. It was her mother. Elizabeth Chen, the governor's wife, the woman who'd always stayed in the background, playing the perfect political spouse, smiling for cameras and hosting charity events. But standing there in that warehouse, she looked nothing like the polished figure Victoria had known her whole life. She looked dangerous, focused, like someone who'd been playing a completely different game all along. Victoria froze, her mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She stammered out, "Mom? What are you doing here? What is this?" Elizabeth stepped forward, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, and said, "Close the door, Victoria. We don't have much time, and what I'm about to tell you changes everything you think you know about your father, about Marco, about all of this." Victoria closed the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Elizabeth walked over to a table in the corner, pulled out a folder thick with documents, photos, recordings, and tossed it down in front of her daughter. She said, "Your father isn't the hero you think he is. For the past 15 years, he's been working with certain elements of organized crime to eliminate his competition and consolidate power. Marco Santini was never his enemy, Victoria. He was his partner until Marco decided he wanted out." Victoria felt like the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. She picked up the folder with shaking hands and started flipping through it. Bank statements showing massive transfers between offshore accounts linked to her father and various criminal enterprises. Photos of her father meeting with known mob bosses, including some of Marco's rivals. Recorded conversations where Governor Chen discussed eliminating threats, not through legal means but through violence. It was all there, years of evidence proving that the man who'd built his career on fighting corruption was actually one of the most corrupt players in the game. Elizabeth continued, her voice cold and calculated. She said, "Your father and Marco had an arrangement. Marco controlled the streets, kept the other families in check, and in return, your father made sure the law looked the other way. They both got rich, they both got powerful. But then Marco met you and everything changed. He started talking about going legitimate, about breaking away from the old system. Your father saw that as a threat, not because Marco was a criminal but because Marco knew too much. If Marco went clean and decided to talk, your father's entire empire would collapse." Victoria could barely breathe. She looked at her mother and asked the question that was tearing her apart inside. "How long have you known about this?" Elizabeth's expression softened for just a moment, showing a flicker of the mother Victoria remembered. She said, "Since the beginning. I've been collecting evidence for over a decade, waiting for the right moment to use it. I couldn't let your father destroy you the way he's destroyed so many others. When I found out you'd gotten involved with Marco, I knew the time had come. Your father's planning to have Marco killed, Victoria. Not arrested, killed. And he's going to make it look like a rival gang hit. It's already in motion, happening within the next 48 hours. Victoria's world shattered completely in that moment. Everything she believed, every value she'd been raised with, every fight her father claimed to be fighting, it was all a lie. But there was no time to process the betrayal, no time to grieve the loss of the father she thought she knew. Because Marco was about to die, and she was the only one who could stop it. Elizabeth handed her a burner phone and said, "You need to warn him. Tell him to disappear tonight, don't wait until morning. And Victoria, you need to decide right now what side you're on. Because once you make that call, once you betray your father, there's no going back. He'll come after you too." Victoria took the phone, her hands steadier now despite the chaos in her mind. She looked at her mother and asked, "What about you? What happens to you when Dad finds out you gave me this information? Elizabeth smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of regret and resignation. She said, I've been dead inside for years playing this role, pretending I don't see what he is. Maybe it's time I stop pretending. You go save the man you love, Victoria. I'll handle your father. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to protect her mother too, but Elizabeth's expression made it clear the decision was already made. So Victoria did the only thing she could do. She ran. Got in her car, drove straight to Marco's penthouse, breaking every traffic law on the way. When she burst through his door at 4 in the morning, Marco was sitting in his living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city lights. He looked up when he saw her, saw the panic in her eyes, and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. Victoria told him everything. About her mother, about her father's secret partnership with the mob, about the hit that was coming for him in the next 2 days. Marco listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he stood up, walked to his window and let out a long breath. He said, I should have known. All those times your father's investigations came up empty, all those raids that somehow missed the real evidence. He wasn't incompetent, he was protecting his investment. And now that I'm becoming a liability, I gotta go. Victoria grabbed his arm, tears streaming down her face now, all the emotion she'd been holding back finally breaking through. She said, come with me. Right now we can disappear, start over somewhere else. You wanted out of this life anyway, now's your chance. We can leave tonight, go somewhere they'll never find us. Marco looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second she thought he was gonna say yes. But then he shook his head. He said, if I run they'll never stop looking. Your father, the families, everyone I've crossed over the years, they'll hunt us for the rest of our lives. You deserve better than that, Victoria. You deserve a real future, not a life spent looking over your shoulder. Victoria felt her heart breaking all over again. She said, so what, you're just gonna give up? Let them kill you? Marco cupped her face in his hands, and despite everything, despite all the violence and darkness that defined his life, his touch was gentle. He said, I'm not giving up. I'm finishing this the only way it can be finished. Your mother gave you evidence against your father, right? That's the key. If we expose him, if we bring everything into the light, the whole system collapses. The families lose their political protection, your father loses his power, and maybe, just maybe, we get a chance to actually build something real out of the ashes. It was insane, dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was also the only play they had left. Over the next 24 hours, Marco and Victoria worked together to put together the most damaging expose in California political history. They compiled Elizabeth's evidence, added Marco's own documentation of his dealings with the governor, and reached out to a journalist known for taking down corrupt officials. They arranged a meeting, set everything up, made sure that even if something happened to them, the truth would still come out. But here's the thing about secrets this big, they don't stay hidden forever, and powerful people don't go down without a fight. On the night before the story was set to break, Victoria got another call. This time it was her father's voice on the other end, and he sounded nothing like the composed politician she'd known her whole life. He sounded desperate, furious, and dangerous. He said, I know what you're planning, Victoria. I know about the evidence, about the journalist, about everything. And I'm giving you one last chance to stop this. Walk away now, convince Marco to disappear quietly, and I'll let you both live. But if that story goes public, if you destroy everything I've built, I will make sure you regret it for whatever short time you have left. Victoria looked at Marco, who was standing beside her, listening to every word. They both knew this was it, the final choice, the point of no return. She could save her own life, maybe save Marco's too, by backing down and letting her father's corruption continue. Or she could burn it all down and hope they survive the fire. Victoria made her choice. She said into the phone, her voice stronger than it had ever been, I'm not backing down, Dad. The truth is coming out and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You should have thought about consequences before you built your empire on lies. She hung up, and in that moment both she and Marco knew they just declared war on one of the most powerful men in California. The story broke the next morning, hitting every major news outlet simultaneously. Governor Richard Chen's secret alliance with organized crime, the years of corruption, the bodies buried, both literally and figuratively, it all came pouring out. The political fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Federal investigations launched within hours, arrest warrants issued, the governor's entire administration imploding in real time. But Victoria and Marco didn't get to watch the chaos unfold from a safe distance. Because while the truth was destroying her father's empire, he'd already made one final move, one last desperate attempt to silence them both before everything came crashing down. Wait, you thought that was the end? No way. See, what I just told you is only part of the story, the part that made headlines, the part people think they know. But what happened in those final 48 hours, the moves Governor Chin made, what Victoria and Marco had to do to survive, and the price they ultimately paid for bringing down an empire, that's a whole other level of crazy that you absolutely need to hear. I'm talking about betrayals within betrayals, alliances nobody saw coming, and a twist that'll make everything you just heard look like the opening act. This story goes so much deeper than a forbidden romance or a political scandal. It's about what happens when you challenge the most powerful forces in society and refuse to back down, even when everything's on the line. So here's what you gotta do right now. Click on the next video that's popping up on your screen, the one that says, "What really happened after the governor fell?" That's where I reveal the final chapter, the part that never made it to the news, the part that shows you whether Victoria and Marco actually made it out alive or if their fight for the truth cost them everything. Don't leave now, not when you're this close to finding out how it all really ended. Trust me, you've come this far, you need to see how this whole thing plays out. Click that video right now and let's finish this story the right way.